We are the origin of a new era.
If you are trying to memorize a complex list of facts right now by reading them top to bottom, you're actively fighting your own biology.
Oh, absolutely. The brain is, it's this incredible efficiency machine.
Right.
And when it encounters these rigid, predictable, linear structures, it simply stops paying attention.
That explains so much, honestly, because picture this. You are staring at a completely blank screen, or maybe it's a massive, terrifying stack of notes scattered all over your desk.
We've all been there.
Yeah, and you are just completely overwhelmed by an upcoming project or, I don't know, a crucial exam. You're reading the material, but the traditional bullet points are they're blurring together into this wall of gray text.
Just a total cognitive block.
Exactly. Your brain feels absolutely full, like it can't take in a single drop more, and yet you still have, like, pages to go.
It is a uniquely frustrating physiological response. I mean, you're putting in the effort. You're doing the reading.
Right, you're trying.
But the architecture of the information on the page is actively clashing with the actual biological architecture of your mind.
Well, welcome to this special Cortex Lab deep dive.
Yeah.
We're going to fix that exact clash.
Yeah.
Our mission today is to completely transform how you process information.
It's a big promise, but we have the data to back it up.
We really do. We're decoding a fascinating stack of resources today, including the instructional guides by Scott Green and the Blockhead series. And basically, we are throwing out the linear rulebook. We are learning how to mind map.
Which is such a necessary pivot.
It is. And I'll be guiding us through this material because, frankly, I desperately need to overhaul my own note-taking habits. I'm practically a beginner again.
Moving away from just, passive recording and stepping into a method that actively stimulates cognitive function, it's crucial. We are essentially going to learn how to speak the brain's natural language.
Okay, let's unpack this idea of a natural language. Because the sources claim that relying on traditional text is basically setting ourselves up for failure. Why is our brain so hostile to just a standard, everyday list?
Well, it comes down to how our brain hemispheres actually divide labor. When you're writing or reading linear text-like standard notes, you are almost entirely leaning on the analytical left side of your brain.
I got the logic side.
Right. That's the hemisphere responsible for processing words, logic, linear sequences. But by doing that, you are completely ignoring the creative right side of your brain.
Which does what exactly in this context?
It processes colors, images, and spatial awareness. So when you only use the left side,
It's like watching a black and white silent film.
Right.
Whereas mind mapping would be more like an IMAX 3D experience for your memory, or like trying to run a marathon by hopping on one leg. You might eventually get to the finish line, but it's going to be exhausting.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it, actually. Mind mapping, by contrast, forces both hemispheres to engage simultaneously. And the data on this hemispheric cooperation is just striking.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, the sources note that using a combination of words and images is actually 6 times more effective for memory retention than using words alone.
Wait, 6 times?
6 times. Because it leaves a distinct visual spatial imprint in your memory bank. Overall, they estimate this method to be 15 to 20% more effective for learning and retention than traditional linear notes.
I mean, a 20% boost just from changing the physical layout of the information is massive.
Yeah.
But I know there are strict parameters for setting this up. I can't just grab a standard spiral notebook and start doodling it.
No, the physical constraints really matter here. You must start on a completely blank A4 paper, and it needs to be oriented in landscape.
Turn sideways.
Right, sideways. This prevents the crowding of ideas as your map grows outward, but the true foundation is what goes in the absolute center.
Right, the starting point.
You have to draw a central image, roughly 1 to 2 inches in size, using a minimum of 3 distinct colors. And here's the absolute most critical rule.
Lay it on me.
You must not draw a frame or a box around that central image.
See, that rule stopped me in my tracks when I read it, because I am completely guilty of drawing a word in the middle of a page and immediately putting a heavy, dark square around it, just to make it look neat. Why does a simple box matter so much?
Because of the underlying philosophy of this method, which is called radiant thinking, the human brain naturally functions through linkages and associations that radiate outward from a central concept.
Radiant thinking, I like that.
Yeah, and when you enclose your starting image in a frame, you are subconsciously signaling a containment of ideas to your brain. It literally creates a cognitive boundary. You're telling your brain to stop expanding.
So it's like the difference between dropping a pebble down a narrow pipe versus dropping a pebble into an open pond. The linear notes are the pipe. The thought only goes in one direction. But an unframed mind map is the pond. The ripples can expand endlessly in all directions, triggering new associations.
I love that analogy. By leaving it unframed, you allow those associative ripples to travel outward unimpeded.
But, I have to push back here for a second. If this radiant pebble in a pond style is truly our brain's natural state, why does it feel so incredibly uncomfortable to actually do it?
It really does at first.
Yeah. If I try to mind map right now, it feels like I'm trying to write with my non-dominant hand. It's so awkward.
This raises an important question, actually, because that cognitive friction is very real, and it brings up a crucial dynamic from the sources. Logical, analytical thinkers, which, let's face it, most of us are trained to be, often deeply resist mind mapping.
Because it challenges our habits.
Decades of ingrained conditioning. You have been explicitly taught since childhood to write on straight lines, moving obediently from top to bottom, left to right.
Are we just fighting against years of rigid schooling then?
Exactly. Transitioning to mind mapping isn't just learning a new trick. You are literally rewiring the neural pathways that dictate how you interact with data.
And the sources give a surprisingly specific timeline for that rewiring, which I found fascinating. We always hear that pop psychology myth that a habit takes, 21 days to form?
Right, the classic 21 days.
But for mind mapping, these guides state it takes a minimum of exactly 12 distinct sessions for a resistant thinker to conform to the rules and feel comfortable. Why exactly 12 sessions?
Because we are talking about active, applied cognitive load, not just passive daily repetition like, say, drinking a glass of water every morning.
That makes sense.
It takes roughly 12 focus sessions to break down your internal stubbornness and prove to your brain that this spatial format is actually trustworthy. Quitting too early is the biggest pitfall the guides identify.
I can completely see why. I mean, around session 3 or 4, when your map looks a bit messy and you're feeling stressed about a deadline, the urge to just open a Word document and type a list must be overwhelming.
It is overwhelming. Your brain craves the familiar safety of a neat, boring list, even if it's less effective. You have to consciously push through that discomfort until that 12th session, when the spatial mapping finally becomes automatic.
Okay, so knowing that we have to survive this frustrating learning curve, how do we actually stick with it? How do we stop ourselves from just giving up at session 4?
Well, by tricking the brain.
Ooh, I like the sound of that.
You overcome that deep-seated resistance by making the process incredibly sensory and visually stimulating.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because it sounds almost like play.
It should feel like play. Memory retention increases dramatically in direct proportion to the number of senses and emotions involved in the learning process. The subconscious mind is ruthlessly selective.
Meaning it just deletes the boring stuff.
Precisely. If a memory is engaging and colorful, it sticks. Good memories stick. If a process is frustrating or visually monotonous, the subconscious actively deletes it to save cognitive space.
It's kind of like turning your daunting to-do list into a highly strategic adult coloring book. Which brings us back to the lines themselves. The guides insist that we draw thick, curved lines radiating from that central image. Never straight lines, and definitely no rulers.
Right, rulers are banned.
Earlier you mentioned that straight lines are boring to the brain. What is the actual mechanism behind that?
As we touched on earlier, the brain is always looking to conserve energy. When the visual cortex registers a straight, uniform line, it instantly predicts where that line is going.
And once it predicts it,
It goes into autopilot. It stops actively processing the visual data. Curved lines, however, mimic organic structures found in nature. Think of the branches of a tree, or even the neural pathways in the brain itself.
right.
Because they aren't perfectly predictable, they keep the eye tracking and moving, which forces the right hemisphere to stay constantly engaged.
Okay, and what about the text sitting on those curved branches? The guides say to use all cap ES, which sure makes sense for readability, but they also insist on using only single powerful keywords.
Yes, no long sentences.
But if I'm mapping out, say, a complex legal document or a dense chapter of a textbook, how do I fit the necessary context into one single word?
Well, you don't try to fit the context on the line. You let the word act as a trigger for the context. This is a profound shift in how we take notes.
Wait, can you explain that a bit more?
Sure, a long sentence does the thinking for you. You read it passively. But a single powerful keyword acts as an anchor. When you see that keyword, your brain is forced to actively recall the context surrounding it.
Oh, I get it.
That struggle to remember, that active retrieval, is precisely what strengthens the neural pathway and locks the information into your long-term memory.
But if I have a page full of curved lines, colors, and single capitalized words, won't it just look like chaotic scribbles after a few days? I mean, how do I actually parse that data when I need to review it?
This is where you establish a consistent color legend. For instance, you train yourself so that every time you use the color green on a branch, it represents positive data, growth, or a go signal. And red consistently represents a warning, a risk, or a stop signal. So your brain instantly translates the data.
Oh, I see. So I'm essentially building a visual shorthand. If I look at the map a week later, my brain instantly feels the difference between a cluster of green branches and a cluster of red ones before it even read the key words.
Precisely. You are communicating with your subconscious through color. However, there is a legitimate concern here regarding data clutter.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Sometimes you simply have a massive piece of data like a complex budget table or an unavoidable paragraph of text that you absolutely must include in your notes.
Right, you can't just slap a 50-cell spreadsheet onto a beautifully curved branch. It would completely ruin the visual flow and trigger that brain rejection we were talking about.
Exactly. So what's the workaround?
This is why the sources introduce what they call the declutter maneuver.
The declutter maneuver. Sounds very tactical.
It is. If you are using digital mapping software, you use topic notes. These are clickable icons that hide the bulky data until you intentionally open them.
Okay, that works for software. But what if you're working on physical paper?
On paper, you use floating topics.
How does a floating topic work on paper?
Instead of trying to squeeze the massive data onto the branch, you draw a small icon on the branch, perhaps a little vault or a file folder. Then, off to the far side of the map, completely disconnected from the main radiant structure, you place the bulky data next to a matching icon.
Oh, that's clever. You preserve the pond, but keep the heavy rocks on the shore.
Exactly. It keeps the central visual clean, organic, and fun, while ensuring the bulky detail is still accessible when you need it.
Now, if formal schooling is what trained this natural, radiant thinking out of us, it stands to reason that young children, who haven't been forced into straight lines yet, would be incredibly adept at this.
They are the ultimate radiant thinkers. Before the educational system forces them into linear conformity, children naturally process their environment through right brain sensory association. They are driven by imagination, color, and spatial relationships.
And the sources point out that early childhood educators already intuitively leverage this. I mean, a nursery teacher doesn't hand a toddler a bulleted list of the alphabet.
No, of course not.
They use songs, physical crafts, brightly colored blocks, and even food to teach letters. Because that sensory association is how kids learn best.
Because that sensory input is how a developing brain anchors abstract concepts. But the sources offer a vital warning for adults trying to introduce formal mind mapping to a child.
What's the warning?
You must shift your mindset from teacher to coach.
Because if I stand over them and dictate exactly what color to use or where the branch should go, I'm just turning a creative, radiant process back into a rigid, stressful chore.
Exactly. The moment you introduce rigid rules, they will resist it just as strongly as an adult resists a blank screen. The guide suggests a fantastic exercise to bypass this, actually.
What is it?
You sit down and tell the child a highly descriptive, engaging story. And while you are narrating, you provide them with a blank page and markers and simply let them draw out the narrative as they hear it.
I love this idea. You're just letting them map the story in real time.
And then comes the crucial second half of the exercise. Once the story is finished, you ask the child to retell the story back to you, but they are only allowed to use their own drawings as a guide.
Wow, that is a massive cognitive workout disguised as playtime.
It really is.
I mean, they have to process audio, translate it into spatial and visual symbols on the page, and then reverse the entire loop to retrieve the memory and verbalize it.
It builds incredible neural density. It tests listening comprehension, spatial reasoning, and active memory retrieval all at once. If we connect this to the bigger picture, coaching kids this way builds critical problem-solving skills for adulthood.
Provided the adults leave room for mistakes so the kids don't become resistant, of course.
Naturally, if their map looks messy to you, let it be messy.
And you can scale this to practical life skills, too. Like you could sit down with a child and plan their own birthday party together.
Oh, that's a perfect application.
You put a big drawing of a birthday cake in the center of the paper, and then you draw branches together for who to invite, what games to play, what food to have. It makes them an active participant in the planning.
And it teaches them how to structure an event visually.
Now, speaking of making sure kids are cognitively prepared, I have to bring up a genuinely quirky detail from the sources because it honestly made me laugh out loud.
I think I know what you're going to say.
While discussing all these high-level techniques for memory retention, the author takes a very serious detour to remind the reader that general brain health is required, which of course means sleep and good nutrition.
Sure.
But they specifically advise wearing protective headgear to prevent trauma.
It is a rather abrupt and highly specific pivot in the text, I'll admit. But medically, they aren't wrong. Physical brain trauma severely impedes memory retention and cognitive mapping.
So the official Cortex Lab advice is grab your colored markers, trust the process, and definitely don't forget your bicycle helmet.
Safety first.
Always. But jokes aside, let's transition from playground helmets to the boardroom. We've seen how a child can plan a birthday party with this tool, but how does this playful, sensory, highly colored framework scale up to handle high-stakes, stressful adult responsibilities?
Well, it's a valid question.
Right, because if I bring a box of crayons into a corporate crisis meeting, my boss is probably going to question my professionalism.
It might feel counterintuitive, but a high-stress corporate crisis is exactly when linear thinking fails us the most.
Really?
Absolutely. When our stress levels spike, the brain's natural defense mechanism is to develop tunnel vision. You fixate obsessively on one single aspect of a problem, usually the most immediate threat, and you completely lose sight of the interconnected variables.
Oh, man. You stare so hard at the falling rock that you don't realize the whole cliff is giving way. So what does this all mean? How does mapping pull us out of that tunnel?
The sources offer a highly structured framework for these exact scenarios. We apply the mapping method to the 5W-H and how.
Okay. The 5W and H, that's who, what, where, when, why, and how.
Correct. When a crisis hits, you place the core problem in the center of the page. Then you draw 6 main radiating branches, one for each of those questions.
Okay.
By forcing your brain to physically map out the answers in distinct spatial streams, you forcibly break the tunnel vision. You achieve a total bird's-eye view of the situation. It literally stops you from panicking over the how before you have clearly defined the why.
I can see how physically drawing that out would slow down your heart rate and force a more methodical analysis.
Yeah.
But what about managing something massive, like a corporate project with a terrifying deadline? Is there a specific map for that?
Yes, the sources provide a tailored setup for project management specifically. Instead of the 5 Ws, you construct your map with 5 specific main branches:
Which are?
budget, resources, scope, people, and deadline. Every single piece of incoming project data gets categorized into one of those 5 visual streams.
So instead of a massive binder of linear notes where a critical budget issue is buried on page 40, you have a single radiating dashboard.
And the results speak for themselves. The guides note that office executives who utilize this visual mapping method attribute a massive 30% of their successful problem-solving directly to the tool.
Wait, a 30% increase in problem-solving success just from changing how the data is arranged on the desk?
Yeah.
That is a staggering competitive advantage.
It really is. It all culminates in what is known as the decision tableau.
The decision tableau.
Right. When you face a high-stakes, multivariable choice, you use the mind map to lay all your cards on the table. You visually trace out every possible action, every alternative option, and every potential consequence on a single, unified sheet of paper.
That would entirely eliminate the anxiety of hidden variables.
Yeah.
Because, when you are just turning a problem over and over in your head or scrolling through a linear list, there's always that nagging dread that you are forgetting some crucial detail.
Which consumes an enormous amount of working memory. By externalizing the problem onto a decision tableau, you remove that cognitive load.
So you don't have to juggle it all anymore.
Exactly. You no longer have to spend energy just trying to hold all the variables in your head. Your brain is finally free to actually analyze the data and execute a sound decision.
Man, this has been an incredibly eye-opening journey. We started with the basic biology of why standard lists make our brains shut down. We navigated the 12-session friction of unlearning our school days, and we scaled all the way up to using colored markers for corporate crisis management.
It's quite a spectrum.
But as we wrap up this Cortex Lab deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, truly mind-expanding concept from the sources.
It's a good one. It requires a fundamental shift in how we perceive the act of note-taking itself.
Right, because we are conditioned to view notes, even a mind map, as a passive record. We think of them as a storage drive for ideas we have already generated.
But an unframed mind map is actually an active generative engine.
Yes. When you draw a central image and extend those thick, curved, empty branches outward, your brain experiences a biological version to the blank space at the end of the line.
It abhors the vacuum.
Exactly. It is literally forced to generate associations to fill in those blanks.
It is a powerful paradigm shift. The ideas you need are already in your head. You just haven't provided them with the correct architecture to flow into reality.
So consider this. What if your frustrating writer's block or your inability to figure out a complex problem isn't a lack of ideas at all? What if it is simply the result of forcing your radiant, multi-processing, heavily networked brain to operate inside a straight, boring, linear cage?
You simply need to remove the frame and let the thoughts radiate.
Which leads us to your clear action item for today. Do not wait for some hypothetical future project to start your 12 sessions. Start session 1 right now.
Today,
Grab a blank A4 paper, turn it sideways, draw a colorful image of the biggest problem you are currently facing right in the center, and do not draw a box around it.
no boxes.
Then draw 6 thick, curved branches using the 5 W's and H, and just watch as your brain actively maps its way out of the stress.
Trust the biology, use your colors, and embrace the friction until it becomes second nature.
Thank you for joining us on this Cortex Lab deep dive. Remember that terrifying blank stream we talked about at the beginning? The next time you face it, you'll know exactly what to do. You don't need to read harder or stare longer. You just need to change the shape of your thoughts. Keep mapping, and we'll see you next time.